An exchange bill out. What was the vote, Representative? Unanimously. And we killed it in the Senate. All right? That's what the Senate, by the way, that's what the Senate's for. All right? Every time we pass a piece of legislation, you lose a little bit more of your liberty. All right? And what some people call dysfunction, all right, in Jefferson City, is government working exactly the way it should work. All right? Because my job is to protect your liberty. Okay? And the gain of your own liberty.
I have to show respect to the senior senator. You know, I just have to say this. You know, there's a small example of nullification that has happened in the Missouri legislature, even, I forget exactly how many years ago, but during the time that Jim and I have been there, and that was on the issue of real ID. On the issue of real ID, we just simply said no. It's a very simple word. And it reminds me, you know, the federal government, I believe that if we will stand up and just simply say no, which is to nullify, the federal government, we're going to quickly find out that the federal government is just like that mom that all of you have seen at Walmart in the last week that says, "Little Johnny, put that down." And little Johnny just keeps doing what little Johnny's doing. And the mom says, "Now, little Johnny, I'm not going to tell you again, put that down." And little Johnny just keeps doing it. And then the mom says, "Little Johnny, 1. And little Johnny just keeps doing what he's doing. 2. Don't make me count to 3. 2.5. Have you ever seen this drill at Walmart? I believe that's what we will see from the federal government. The federal government is a dog that barks and barks and barks, and when you finally stop running away from it and turn and face it, you see that it has no teeth.
Is it on? Okay.
We can hear you.
Yeah, all right, great. I have a question. I don't know which one of you want to answer it, maybe all of you. I'm sorry Ed left because I would like to hear what he had to say, but you guys are talking about nullification, I'm all with you. But what about the court system? We've learned before that the court system can nullify what you guys do. If you pass a law that's constitutional, they can call it unconstitutional and vice versa. And we've got a judiciary that's made law where they're not supposed to be making law. They're that third branch that's supposed to interpret the Constitution, not make law, but they've done it. So what do you do about those guys?
Let's let the guy. Now wait a minute. I'm not going to give you this mic again. I do want you to speak about this though, because you are our judiciary guy, Paul.
The judicial branch can't enforce anything. They don't have the power to enforce it. Andrew Jackson one time sent troops, I think, down into Mexico, and they said, "Oh, it's unconstitutional." The court said you can't do that, and he said, "Well, let him enforce it." Because he's the chief executive. He's the chief executor of the law. So, yeah, they can say that what we're doing is unconstitutional, and we can play this whole game back and forth. But if we have a strong governor, a governor can basically say, well, we don't have to enforce the court's ruling. And I would say that as long as we're in keeping with the Constitution, we're following the parameters of the role of government within the confines of natural law, meaning that the proper role of government is to protect people's individual God-given liberties, then I would say that in a case like that the governor would be totally acting appropriately.
The judiciary has neither the power of the sword or the purse. All right? And remember that we have, since the Civil War, allowed, and when I say we the people, and then the other two branches have run away from the courts with their tail between their legs. All right? And all we need to do is start standing up, and within the rule of law, all right, and thank them for their opinion. All right? Because that's what they used to call them, right? They used to call them opinions. And you know what? How would it be possible? Think this through. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall, you know, in Constitutional Hall as they were having these debates. But think about, you know, again, that separation of powers and the idea that the states, the 13 states that were establishing this rule of law, this Constitution, to actually have this agent the federal government, okay, that would be delegated certain powers on behalf of the states to protect the states and the people, right? Imagine a concept that if the state as a sovereign got into a debate with the federal government as the other of the two dual sovereigns, and that the final arbiter of that dispute between the two would be a branch of one of those sovereigns that is in the dispute. That would be like me getting into a fight with my neighbor, all right, and then going to his mother to adjudicate the problem between the two of us, right? There is no way that that's what our founding fathers were thinking. It can't be. What I do believe that they were thinking was that, again, the power resides in the people, and which branch is closest to the people? The legislative branch, right? The genius of having them come up for re-election every 2 years, so they were responsible to the people. If the court deems that something, they render an opinion that says something that you just did is outside the Constitution, and then a governor or a legislature stands up and thumbs their nose, okay, at the courts, it's up to you, the people, to make the right decision to throw those bums out of office so that they do things that are within the bounds of our Constitution. You know, Glenn Beck wrote this book on the original argument, and no matter what you think of Glenn Beck, you know, if you're a big fan or not a big fan, you've got to pick this up, because this is the Federalist Papers rewritten and with some commentaries so that a guy like me can understand it. All right? And if you can believe that 3 of our founders, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, wrote 85 different treatises, these papers, all right, to describe what they were thinking and what the debate was like when the when they're putting together the Constitution, and then they printed these in the local papers for the people to read, to sell to the people, so that they could get their representation, their representatives to ratify, right? Mm-hmm. That's how they did it. They actually went to the people and said, this is what we're doing on your behalf. You know how important that is? So we can understand it. We don't need some guy in a black robe telling us what's constitutional and what's not. I don't want to fight this battle on Obamacare in the courts. I don't care what the courts say. I can tell you that it falls outside of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. All right?
And I think we have another question. Please.
Yes. Oh, is it not on? Is it on? Okay. Before I say anything, ask the question, I just have a suggestion, making a comment about, I think it was Jim in your opening statement. You said it wasn't enough to vote, we must educate as well the public. Just a suggestion, this is Christmas time. One of the things I'm doing to get the word out about Bill Randall's is sending one of his flyers in all of my Christmas cards to the public with a little note, this is who I'm supporting. People have not, if they don't know him, will then know him and have the flyer. So that is one way to do it. Your entire Christmas list gets a flyer for the candidate you're supporting. Okay. And my question, I guess, would be to Senator Lemke and Paul Kurtman. The Healthcare Freedom Act that was passed last year, this year, that was passed, that was 71% of the vote. If, heaven forbid, Obama is reelected, how will that affect this state when Obamacare in full takes effect in January 2013?
I think its main effect is it was the people telling their legislators, okay, that they don't want this to be the policy of Missouri. You know, beyond that, you know, it's again going to have to be challenged in the courts if your legislature tries to move forward, all right, then you have a state statute, all right, that somebody would bring a challenge against, and then we have to rely on the courts. You know, the message that we, the people, have to continue to send our elected officials at the state level is, we don't want to have anything to do with Obamacare, all right? So, you know, don't establish the exchange, don't take any of the money. I mean, I see a patriot right back here, Gretchen. I mean, she right? Tells me all the time, quit taking that money, that federal money, for education. She's exactly right. Right? Because you know what we can say to the federal government then when they try to stick their nose in on how we educate our children? You know, we can tell them to get out of our business. Right? But if you take the heroin, you know, then they're going to want to, you know, chime in.
Just thinking outside the box a little bit. I think your question was if Obamacare comes to us in full because he gets reelected. We can still nullify it with a strong governor. But let's just say we still have this little guy in office. I think it might be fun to introduce a resolution urging our Attorney General, who's a Democrat right now, to sue our Democrat governor for violation of Proposition C, because Proposition C gives the people the freedom to participate or to not participate in Obamacare. So I'm just saying it might help draw a lot of attention right back to the whole issue, and then at the following election, we might get rid of a governor and a bad Attorney General.
And next question?
Yeah, I got, well, I don't know if this is on. So,
There it is.
okay, now it is on. Right. Let there be sound. The question, I guess, for every one of you. One, to Representative Kurtman, when the exchange passed unanimously, I assume you were out of the room at the time. You might want to explain that one later. To Bill Randall's, with the medical marijuana, I agree with you. Do you take that as a nullification by California of a federal statute, or did they just legalize it according to state statute? Because my understanding is the federal government's still arresting people in California for medical marijuana. So they really didn't nullify the federal statute. I guess the hardest question I got, unfortunately for a very dear friend, and my biggest concern on this issue, and I guess I'm the fly in the ointment, nullification scares me. I do think that's what existed under the Articles of Confederation, and that's why we have a Constitution in the first place, because we didn't want a single state to be able to nullify federal law. That was the problem that caused the Constitution in the first place. I know Jefferson wrote Kentucky resolutions. He later corrected himself. I don't know if you're familiar with a letter in which he calls the people the true corrective. I think the problem that we have with our Constitution today, this could be directed to every single person in the room, and I'm guilty of it myself. Have you ever voted for an elected official who violated the Constitution of the United States? If you have, you're not part of Jefferson's solution. Madison talked about nullification, as you said, towards the end of his life. He described it as a fatal inlet to anarchy and a contradiction in terms. Madison's solution was different. He did not want a single state to nullify. He wanted a majority of states to nullify. He called for a constitutional amendment in a letter, 1835. John C. Calhoun ignored it. That's my question.
Well, I guess I'll start with the medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is nullification, and it's very well done. You're right, the federal government's arresting a few people in California, large-scale traffickers. What they're not doing is going in and arresting the guys running the medical marijuana shops. They know where to find them. I saw two of them on Bill O'Reilly a couple of weeks ago. Did y'all see them? $20 million gross a year. It's pretty easy to find them, and the IRS knows where they are. They call themselves nonprofit, but they wouldn't say how much money they personally made off that nonprofit. Look, if that's not nullification, I don't know what is. The federal law says you can't have or sell marijuana. They're having and selling marijuana in vast quantities under a pretext of legality, under a fig leaf. So I think it's classic. Now, I'm going to give Jim a little introduction to answer his question. Sure, not that he needs it, but the nullification discussion you've got to keep in mind when you refer to the founders. The founders were discussing a very narrow range of federal options. They never envisioned the notion of where the federal government would impose uniformity on the states in a host of ways. They embraced state differences, huge state differences. As a matter of fact, when our Constitution was established, many people don't know this, several states had established churches. And they did for a long time. The federal government didn't try to stamp that out. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but I'm just using it as an illustration of examples of differences. The states were the laboratory of democracy, and they were free to function very differently. What has happened recently is the federal government has pressed the states into the same mold, so they've become not much more than poorly paid provinces of the federal government. That's why you're seeing the resurgence in the idea of nullification. And I don't think we should get hung up on terms. We can call it nullification from the negative, or from the positive. We can say limited government. We can talk about state sovereignty. It's all the same notion. The federal government has a lane it's supposed to be in, and the states have their own lane, and then the people have the biggest lane. We flip that around. And so that's why what the founders were saying about it is instructive, but in a sense not determinative, because they never envisioned a world where the federal government would occupy so much of our activities. Jim?
I can't improve on that. I can't improve on that. The only thing I would add is that this is a debate and a discussion that is worthy of us having. All right? Now, we might not agree. Even, I don't think our founders agreed, okay, on the issue. And so, but what we do need to do is call into question those lanes. And that's what we're doing when we're advocating that a state stand in the gap on behalf of the people, all right, against tyrannical government. And that's what we have. We have tyrants that refuse. They can read, okay? So they are refusing. I mean, I'm not talking about a 2,000-page bill. I'm talking about a constitution. That's what? How many? Is it 3,500 words long? Right? And they can't understand it, but they choose not to. As a matter of fact, they laugh in the face of the people that have elected it to ask them if they think a bill is constitutional. And it's time for a revolution. Yeah. It might, it might have to be every 20 years or so that we might need a bloody revolution. Okay, I'm not advocating a bloody revolution. We need a revolution at the polls. All right, and we need to throw every one of the bums out, and I don't care what letter is behind their name. All right, question: have we ever voted for a politician, an elected official that is supported an unconstitutional bill? I've done it just recently, and I'm not proud of it. But if he's not careful, he's going to have some competition in 4 years. All right? I hope you all know who I'm talking about. All right.
Just real quick about that healthcare change, it did vote unanimous. Here's the deal. According to Obamacare, every state's supposed to set up an exchange by 2013. Now, either A, the legislature can take charge of the exchange and do it themselves, or B, the governor can go ahead and invite the federal government in to set up a bureaucracy on their own, outside of any control of the state legislature. So I, like a lot of my colleagues, said, you know what, this is a position that we don't want to be in. We're just the legislature. We can't enforce the law. All we can do is say, if we have the opportunity to take it, then give it to us, because it's kind of like this. I don't know if anybody here's ever thrown a grenade. I've thrown lots of them. I was in the Marines for several years. If I'm locked in a box with the enemy, in this case a liberal governor, and somebody comes over and throws a grenade in, I'm going to do my best to get my hands on that grenade. Because if he gets his hands on it, I don't trust him with it. Now, it's a grenade. I would rather not have it at all. But if that's the box that I'm put in, then I would much rather be under the control. And in that bill also, at the very end, we did something that at least the governor sure wouldn't have done, is we put in there that as soon as Obamacare is ruled unconstitutional, the whole exchange goes away. But if the federal government would have come in and set up the whole exchange on their own, Obamacare might have been ruled unconstitutional, but now we got a federal bureaucracy operating in Missouri that we can't get rid of. So that kind of puts the question in a whole different perspective.
Paul,
That's why.
I could maybe disagree with you just a little bit.
Well, you can't. I'm just saying from the perspective that we had at the time. That's why. But now it died when it got to the Senate. That's fine. That's great. I'm just saying that there's some people that might have voted for it. That doesn't really make them any less conservative. They have reasons for voting for it, and that might have been one of the reasons because it was sure one of mine. And the governor, for example, he wants this grenade to go off because when the Senate was going around the state having hearings on the healthcare exchange, he went ahead and got an executive order all ready to go anyway. So he was wanting to do it. He does not want the legislature to have it. If that gives you any indication of what his liberal agenda might be. So that was just one reason to explain why anybody might want to know why it was I voted for it and the rest of my colleagues did too. It doesn't make them any less conservative. We just see a grenade and we don't want the governor to have that particular grenade. And he wants it.
Paul, I would have to disagree with you a little bit about the grenade analogy. I think that the grenade, once we pass 609, belongs to us. A couple of points. If you read 609, you'll see that had we set up a Missouri exchange, that we would be responsible for the cost of running that bureaucracy after 2014. We would own it. And when that grenade explodes, we're the ones holding the grenade, not the federal government.
We're already holding it. It's taxpayer money. We're already holding that grenade.
The other point, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Cato Institute and the Wall Street Journal both, there's a glitch in the healthcare law where if the states set up exchanges, they have a mechanism for premium support. But if the federal government sets up the healthcare exchange, there is no mechanism for premium support, which is a huge, huge thing. The whole concept of Obamacare is predicated on you paying for your neighbor's health care. You take that away, and it's a huge thing. So I think not passing 609 and Missouri not setting up healthcare exchanges is a form of nullification. We're saying we are not going to participate in our own demise. We're not going to participate in what you're trying to shove down our throat. Once we've passed that, they've achieved triangulation. We've now bought into their plan. We've become part of their plan. And also, if you read 609, it requires the state of Missouri and the bureaucracy that we've set up in their behalf to report on people who have not complied with Obamacare, who have not bought approved health insurance, report to employers on employees. So, respectfully, I think the Missouri House was not doing their job. Sorry.
609 is the health care exchange. Next question.
Sorry, thanks. I'm really interested in talking to you about judicial reform, and I've got a question for the legislators. I'm very interested in setting up a citizens legislative review panel for cases that aren't transferred to the Missouri Supreme Court, for cases that are denied, the cases are dismissed and denied discovery, for cases that fall between the cracks in the system. I'm very interested, where individuals and litigants have exhausted their remedies and through the courts, I'm interested in having the legislators, I'm interested in finding a vehicle to provide feedback, to clean up the legislation, because the more legislation you give us, the more you're denying our rights and our freedoms. And I don't think necessarily having more laws on the books are the solution, especially when judges don't follow them. Okay, and they have their discretionary powers to do as they choose, and they're not being held accountable. So what I'm proposing here is to set up a citizens legislative review board so that legislators can get the feedback and to identify specifically the problems as to why these cases are falling through the cracks, why they're being dismissed to to the Missouri Supreme Court, et cetera. Is there, if we can do it, how can we do it with the legislators? Thank you.
I'm going to take a little bit of moderator privilege here, and this is what I'm going to say. These three gentlemen came here tonight after much study specific to the subject of nullification. And so I think you raise a wonderful point, and I think it's something that perhaps you could speak with any of them after the meeting. But what I'm afraid of is this. If we get off the subject of nullification, we're never going to come back to it. And so I don't know if perhaps one of these gentlemen might have just a quick 30-second thing that they might say to that point, but I don't want us to get off of the subject of nullification.
Good things come to those who are patient and wait. I've been introducing judicial reform for the last 6 years in the House and in the Senate, and I've had very difficult time getting traction with my colleagues. Because of the redistricting that just happened and what the judges did to the legislature by poking the legislature in the eye and saying, we don't care, about it, we're not taking into consideration, what the Constitution says about the way the districts should be contiguous, the makeup of communities. They split counties, they split communities, they put 55 incumbents in districts with other incumbents, all right? And I've gotten more email and more feedback from my colleagues in both the House and the Senate that are ready to change the way we choose judges in this state. That all I did was sit back and cross my arms and smile, okay? Because the time is now, okay? So we've had discussions about court reform in the past, and I know that we have judges that are doing things that are tearing families apart and, are, I would deem unconstitutional. You know me, I tried to impeach a judge in the past. So there's no love lost, okay? But I believe the momentum is finally there. And what we need to do is, instead of writing more laws, you're right, we need to have judges, that will govern by the Constitution and by the rule of law and work for the people. And we just need to have better judges, okay? And that's what this judicial reform will address.
Very good. And let me just say, we certainly value your question, and we don't want to make anybody feel suppressed. This meeting tonight is specific to the subject of nullification. Next question.
Yeah, I just want to know, how much power does a governor have? Because I would think a governor would be able to say, EPA, get the heck out of my state. Obama, I don't care what you say, I'm just not going to do it because this is not right for our state. Can somebody address that?
Well, since I'm running for the job, I'll take the first. The Constitution of the state of Missouri gives Missouri one of the most powerful governorships in the country. The governor has vast powers in the state, rarely used, but vast powers. The truth is, although I would ask the legislature to do the things that I've talked to you about because I believe in doing things in the open, I think I could probably, by executive order, refuse the EPA's money, refuse the Department of Education money, but I believe there will be overwhelming support in the legislature, and I'm going to submit it to them. In terms of these other proposals, the good thing about being a governor is you have official immunity for most acts you take. And so this resistance to the federal government is something I can do as part of my job. I hope we elect a Republican Attorney General because a Democrat's going to be very depressed. That's just defending me repeatedly in court against intrusions against the federal government. And you have the ability to shape the argument. One of the advantages to being a lawyer is you know where the play is in the law. So when the federal government says do X, I will say no. And then if I get a judicial opinion that says I have to do X, then I'll do X plus Y minus Z and say I've complied, like medical marijuana in sanctuary cities, and let them litigate it again until we wait them out. You can do a lot of these kinds of things. And you can essentially tie the federal government's hands, as Senator Lemke said, by getting off the federal money. And we have a lot of support for that in the legislature now, leaders that are backing it. And I think the public's ready for it. I think the public is ready, perhaps, to forego a few state services in exchange for a lot more freedom. So we can do that, and we can shape this discussion in a myriad of ways going forward, and I will.
You caused almost like fantasy type dreams to come into my mind as you were saying that. I'm just trying to imagine as a senator how fantastic it would be to have a governor like that. Yes, sir.
I spent 16 years in the legislature, all in the minority party. I think you all need to know that part of the reason why you got such good men up there is because you're working hard. People like you are the reason why we've taken over the House and the Senate, why we're doing some things. Stay with it. Keep fighting for us. Thank you.
Thank you for all the years in the wilderness. I can't even imagine what it must have been like to be a conservative Republican in a Democrat majority all those years. So thank you for what you did. Yes, sir.
I believe when the Constitution was crafted, it was written in layman's terms so that the average person, the farmer, the merchant, could understand unequivocally what the Constitution meant. I guess this question would be addressed to Bill Randall, since he's the attorney on the panel. Why is it that if the Constitution is written in layman's terms, do we need attorneys to interpret it for us?
Well, you know, you have to get a certain undesirable element off the street, so they're not committing crimes. No, your point is a very good one. Something that bothers me greatly is this notion of the Constitution as a living document that changes over time. The Constitution is nothing more and nothing less than a contract that the people and the government entered into. Now imagine if you and I had a business contract, and I got to reinterpret it anytime I wanted to your detriment and to my benefit. Well, that's exactly what's been going on since. And anytime people give you complicated legal doctrines to try to explain the Constitution, they're hiding something. It's a simple document of freedom, a simple document of rights and powers that any reasonably educated citizen should be able to thoroughly understand. But they have an agenda. That's why.
And based on my observation, it is a common practice of liberals to try to make you think you can't understand something, when in fact it is a very simple document. It takes the average person about 35 minutes to read it, which, by the way, is the same amount of time it takes to watch a sitcom. I think the 30 minutes in the Constitution is better invested. Yes, sir.
My comment is really around the refusal of federal funds. And when I look at the Missouri budget, about 1/3 of that in round numbers comes from the federal government. So my question is, why would an intelligent people pay a federal bureaucracy to take our money away from us, then have a separate federal bureaucracy to decide how much of it to give back and when to give it back? Why don't we just keep it here?
I don't want to talk about that for 30 seconds.
Amen. I mean, that's all I can say. I mean, that is the question. And again, if there's any reason to send Ed Martin, you know, in Congress, it's for guys like Ed Martin to start asking those questions, right? And you know, if we're turning this ship around, and the only way we're going to do that is to get majorities in Washington, D.C. that understand the Constitution and the concept of limited government, and then start reining the thing in. And the process has to start, folks. I mean, we didn't get here overnight. A smart theologian once told me that there are never leaps into apostasy. It's always slow drift. Well, we've been at a drift for a long time, all right? And this is not going to be fixed overnight, but we have to start. We have to start the process. of fixing and righting the ship, for our children and grandchildren. So that's how you do it. If they don't believe in the Constitution, all right, if they're not talking about the Constitution, get as far away from that candidate as possible. Yeah. All right.
Jim, I got to congratulate you. That was the shortest comment you made all night after having said, I really don't have anything to say about it. Another question in the back.
Yes, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Can you hear me?
No, I got it on. Turn the red light on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, the powers of Congress. To coin money, regulate the value thereof. This is addressed more to Representative Kurtman. Regulate the value thereof. And you know what came out of that? Regulate the value thereof. The Federal Reserve System. You can boo now. If I want to boo. Okay. All right. So I wanted to ask Representative Kurtman, his sound money bill, does that have the effect of nullifying the Federal Reserve System by taking the power of a person to regulate the value of their money? You see what I'm saying?
Yes. And the answer is yes and no. And the reason it has to be yes and no is because the sound money bill that I'll be introducing, just real quick, for probably half the people in here probably don't even know what it is, because I haven't really spent a lot of time talking about it. I flew out to Utah earlier this year, and Utah passed a bill called the Sound Money Bill, and basically what this bill does is if anybody has United States minted gold and silver coins, they're allowed to put those coins into a depository, and in exchange for putting their money in that depository, those gold and silver coins, they'll be issued a debit card. So then they can go around, and they can actually use their debit card to purchase things based on the value of gold and silver, because they have gold and silver in that account, not just Federal Reserve notes. So this is going to allow people to have an increased purchasing power with their money. It's going to allow there to be competitive currencies, so to speak. So if the value of gold and silver skyrockets and really goes up, well, you just need a lot more money. You can use your debit card and spend your gold and silver. And if it plummets, then you go back to using worthless Federal Reserve notes. The value of the dollar continues to plummet. So that bill will nullify the monopoly that the Federal Reserve has in Missouri. And one of the side effects of this, there's people that invest in gold and silver. And if they ever want to get their value of gold and silver, they actually have to take all that gold and silver and sell it and exchange it for Federal Reserve notes. But this will allow them to keep it in a depository. So there's going to be people from all over the country, all over the world maybe, who take their gold and silver and they say, well, I'm going to go to Missouri, keep my money in a depository in Missouri, and whenever I spend that money, I'm going to be spending it in Missouri. So there's going to be a whole lot more commerce here, hopefully. That's the idea. Since Utah passed this bill, there's been over $1 billion worth of money in gold and silver currency that they already know people are planning on moving to their state because they know they can actually spend it at face value in their state. So it's a fantastic idea. So we're going to be introducing that bill hopefully this year, and I have another bill that's going right along with that to help draw attention to it. And I need everybody to sign my petition. It's at paulkirkman.net. But I'm introducing the House resolution, and if it passes, Missouri will be taking a position on the Federal Reserve transparency bills that are in Washington, D.C. They did a partial audit of the Federal Reserve, and they found out that upwards of $16 trillion in secret was created and then loaned out to bail out foreign central banks. The Federal Reserve does not have that authority. Article 1, Section 8, the people and the states gave to the federal government the authority and the responsibility to govern and regulate the value of our money in our monetary policy. The United States Congress does not have the constitutional authority to delegate their authority to anybody else, because at that point they're not accountable anymore. So I'd like to see the Federal Reserve go away because the same government all of this is a Missouri issue. They say, oh, it's a federal. No, it's a Missouri issue, because I guarantee anybody here who has cash right now has Federal Reserve cash. It's continuing to lose value literally on a daily basis. PaulKirkman.net, make sure you sign the petition and pass it around.
You just have a quick follow-up question to that?
FDR passed confiscated gold. So how would you protect us from that same behavior? They literally came into homes and took the money, ransacked the home, took the gold. And it was never, these people would never repaid their losses. So how do you protect that?
Really.
Oh, this is squarely nullification.
Precious metals also include 223, 45. But really, here's the way that this would work. People take their United States minted gold and silver coins and put it into this depository. This is one of the things that I'm experimenting with this bill. Before that would happen, they would have to return, because this kind of stuff isn't going to happen overnight. They're going to get word about it long before. It's not going to happen overnight, and the next day there's troops, going in. The idea, cross my fingers, right? The idea would be that they would have to return all the gold and silver because it's not their money, so they can't return it to the government. They'd have to give it back to the owners. Does that make sense? If the federal government wants to confiscate gold and silver, the depository cannot give it to the federal government because it's not theirs to give. They would have to return it to the owners, the people that own the gold and silver.
But they mint the money because they use that coin. They mint the gold and silver.
No, they couldn't. Because your money is a medium of exchange. Your money literally is the manifestation of your labor. It is your property. So in the bill, we have a measure for that. We're still working on the bill, but that's one of the things that we're doing. And if they want to come into your home, then you can deal with that however you want to. Yes.
Bunch of crazy right-wingers. I did want to make just a very brief announcement, and that is on your tables, there are forms that you can fill out your information, name, contact information, et cetera, et cetera. Robin, she was just up here a minute ago, but she had asked me to ask everybody, as many of you as you would, to just fill those out, and they're right on your tables. We do have another question in the back. Yes, sir.
Is it on?
And depending on whether or not this question is for Senator Lemke, it might be our last question of the night. So we have to begin at 7:30.
Okay, in keeping with the theme of nullification, I'll be brief. I was proud, as I'm sure everyone in the room was, with the proposition that told the world 71% of the people of Missouri were against Obamacare. The state did nothing. Claire McCaskill thumbs her nose at that 71% vote. The state does nothing. Reportedly, our governor, our Senator Blunt voted to fund Obamacare as part of the defense bill. The state does nothing. What do you, as panel members, wish you had done specifically from wherever you were in your walk of life at the time to nullify Obamacare? 3 steps, please.
Well, I think they've been addressing that, throughout the evening. I know myself and my colleagues have been working so that whenever anything that is connected to Obamacare starts to rear its ugly head in enabling legislation moving through the General Assembly, we put a stop to it. When a quasi-governmental agency with an appointed board is told by the governor of this state that they need to accept the level 1 grant to establish the infrastructure of an exchange, myself and 2 of my colleagues ran from the Capitol building, jumped in our cars, and went across Jeff City, and we barged into a meeting that they were having at this quasi-governmental agency and said, what the heck is going on? With their agenda in hand, because they were going to accept the level 1 grant. I mean, we can only do those things that are within our power to do. I'm sorry, I can't be in Washington, D.C., holding, Senator Blunt's hand, and telling him how to vote. That's your job. All right? Get on the phone, write the letters, and tell them. So, it's up to us to hang on to this republic, right? And if the women that you elect at every level aren't doing it, then vote the bums out. All right? Let me tell you this, there is no perfect politician, there is no perfect statesman out there, okay? We're all fallen, we all make mistakes, but your job and my job is to communicate as best as we can, and so we need to hear from you continually. It's not enough just to, call us that one time on that one important issue, that Rush or Hannity or one of the guys said, burn their phones up. You got to stay on top of us, okay? I take very seriously what the Missouri Constitution says about my job description on your behalf. It says, I've been elected to protect your life, your liberty, your pursuit of happiness, and the gain of your own industry. And that when I fail to do that, when government fails to do that, it fails in its chief design. That's what I wake up and think about every day, all right, when I'm representing New Jefferson City. If your other representatives and senators at all levels aren't doing that, you need to have a serious talk with them, right? We all do, collectively. Okay, and that's what this is all about. So we need to do, we need to cut the head off of this thing when it rears its ugly head at every opportunity that we get. But to give you, three things that I can do as far as what's going on in, with the federal government or this administration, we're doing our best. Jay Nixon is not only ignoring the Constitution and state statute, okay, he is at every point trying to circumvent the legislative process because we have frustrated him over these 3 years. Okay? So, I mean, even to the point that he is taking monies that your General Assembly appropriated for certain issues, withholding them, and then spending on something that we didn't appropriate the money on. You can't do that. We ought to be impeaching the guy. Listen, the Attorney General, who we asked for opinions, can he do this? The guy won't answer. He won't come out from underneath his desk, as somebody else said. So.
Three things that, from the legislature, it's really important to understand this thing, jurisdiction. I've got people in my district that call me up and they're upset that MoDOT used concrete instead of blacktop. And they expect me, there's certain things that I don't have jurisdiction over. I can't go into the governor's office and tell him exactly how he needs to do this, this, and this within his office, because he has his own policy that he has jurisdiction over. And the courts have jurisdiction over different things too. So I would highly recommend reading through the Constitution, the Missouri Constitution. Senator Lemke has one over here. When you look at it, it's a bunch of legal words and clauses and sections, and it's kind of boring. But you'll have a much better perspective, as I did, once you actually read through the Missouri Constitution and find out exactly what the jurisdiction of the different branches of government are. That way you don't place any unreasonable expectations on either the governor, the legislature, or the judicial branch. I would highly recommend that you do that. It did a lot of help for me because before I got elected, it was easy to get on Facebook and slam somebody. But then you find out later on, oh, sorry, it's not quite their jurisdiction, and then it's kind of awkward. Next time you're at town hall meeting, you need to shake their hand and apologize. But there's things that you can do. So from the legislature's perspective, sometimes the only thing that a legislator can do is stand up and read the Constitution in spite of whoever tells them it's unconstitutional or it's not right to read the Constitution on the House floor. So you need more people that'll do that. That's one of the things that the legislature should do, is take advantage of the opportunity that we have to debate, to school the other 163 members of the House that they're not there to wear a stupid pin that costs $90 just to go home and tell people that they're a state rep. They're there to protect people's individual God-given liberty. It's the easiest job description in the history of the world. That's one of the things that we can do. Other things that we can do is just introduce bills just so we can introduce the debate. But we can only go so far, because once it leaves the jurisdiction of the House or the Senate and it moves on, at that point, it's not for hands like that box that we were talking about before that I think we might disagree on. There's certain jurisdictions, there's things that I can't do. I can't, if I see somebody speeding, although I might have a say in the highways or speed limit, I'm not the one that can write the ticket. I'm the legislator. I just introduce the policy. I don't actually enforce it. I can't arrest somebody and take them to jail. But the most thing that we can do oftentimes is just talk as much as we can. And being a state representative gives you a certain platform. When you do talk, a lot of times people will listen a little bit. So that's one of the things that we can do. But don't expect the legislature just to say, you know what, the governor said to do this, and if we don't do it, he's going to do it. So because if we, what I'm trying to say is that there's just jurisdiction. Sometimes the governor operates outside of his constitutional parameters. He'll do stuff anyway. But the debates is probably one of the most important things. Read the Constitution, please, the Missouri Constitution.
Thank you. I think that's a very good discussion on jurisdiction. I think literally we could almost have